expressions with powers can have negatives as well, and you need to be aware that there's different ways that they can be written down in different combinations. And there's a few examples on this page, and what you'll find out is that a lot of them really are the same thing. So if you expand them and look at them, you'll see that they're actually asking the same question. So in this first example, negative, and then inside the brackets is 4 squared. It's like there's a negative 1 coefficient in front of this. So it's all, the whole thing inside the brackets is multiplied by negative 1. So when we write this out, it might look like negative, and then in the brackets is 4 times 4. So we would have a negative 16 for our value here because we just complete what's in the brackets first and then multiply it. It's like there's a negative 1 coefficient in front of this. Negative 1 times 4 times 4. Negative 1 times 16, or negative 16. So if you do each example out in expanded form, it will help you to determine what the differences are. So here, this one, we've got negative, and then our base is 4. Our base is not negative 4, it's just 4. So this one would look like negative 4 times 4. And again, because we have multiplication here, it would be very similar to this one right here. We would have a negative 4 times 4, a negative times a positive, which is a negative 16. So these two aren't really very different, although if you look at them here, they do look slightly different. Um, in one case, you've got the brackets around the 4 squared, but it means exactly the same thing. Now, if we look at the third example, here our base is, again, this isn't really much different than this example up here, except we've got the brackets around the whole thing. But again, if we look at it, our base is 4, the base that the exponent is drawing on. So again, we've got negative 4 times 4, and that's going to be equal to negative 16. In this example, however, you'll see that the brackets are around the negative 4. So that means that this exponent is related to the entire thing that's in the brackets. So the whole thing, the negative 4, is our base. So in this case, we're going to have negative 4 times negative 4. It's the negative 4 that's multiplied by itself. So a negative times a negative is positive. So in this case, it's positive 16. So if you write out each example in expanded form, it might make it a little bit easier to determine what the value of it is. Just take a look at a couple of more examples, because now we've got negative 4 cubed. So what would our base be in this case? Is negative 4 our base, or is just 4 our base? Because there's no brackets around the negative 4, our base is 4, so the exponent is for just 4, not negative 4. So we end up with a negative, and then 4 times 4 times 4. Okay, it's almost like these three are separated. 4 times 4 times 4. So 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So our answer is negative 64. And here's a slightly different example. Again, you take a look at it. What would the base be in this case? What are we multiplying by itself 3 times? Well, again, the base is negative 4. So we're going to multiply negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. Okay. Now we have a negative. Let's do this first. Negative 4 times negative 4. That's a negative times a negative, so that's 16. And then multiply it by a negative 4. So a negative times a positive, we end up with negative 64. So if you look at these, even though these two are different when they're in expanded form, one just has the negative in front and then 4 times 4 times 4. And this actually has negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4. But because it's a cubed, because we're doing it 3 times. So it's a negative times a negative times a negative, and that results in a negative. So our answers are identical, negative 64 in both cases, but the expanded form and the way you do them, the process, is different for each one of these numbers here. So when you're doing all of these with brackets, try to understand what the expanded form is, and that will help you to calculate your final answer. And it will also help you to keep track whether it's a negative or a positive.